The sky had been so brilliantly blue back home. I hate that at the end all I see is black, black, black. "What's it look like to you?" my sister asked, never slowing her swinging as her pudgy hand pointed at a fluffy nimbus cloud. I kept pace with her, even if swinging so high made my stomach roll. I considered the white blob, my mind working to come up with a subtle answer. "It looks like a spaceship." Marie had snorted, the golden pigtails of her hair trailing behind her as she swung higher and higher. "No way, it's a pony." It was that perfect Midwestern summer day, the cicadas screeching in the trees and the air hanging thick with humidity. The water of the lake across the park caught the sun in lines of brilliant white reflection, and I hoped soon Daddy would take us swimming to escape that heat. I wrinkled my nose at Marie, skidding my heels in the dirt until I came to a stop. "It's my opinion, and opinions can't be wrong." She didn't skid to a stop, but instead let herself slow down naturally. "A stupid opinion." When her swing finally came to a stop, I was preparing to storm away and tell on her, and then she spoke again, a thin, frightened note in her voice. "Tara, is your helmet cracked?" I paused, fear skittering through me. "What?" Her eyes wide, pupils blown from terror. "Is your helmet cracked?" I reached my shaking, gloved hand to the glass of my helmet, tracing the lines of the cracks spreading through the face of my helmet like the roots of a tree. Suddenly, I'm not on the slightly rusty playground outside of our vacation cabin. Instead, I'm in the shattered wreck of the Crete, the rudderless hulk of the cruiser being taken by gravity. Yeah, I guess it is. The USS Sidonia had been tasked with establishing an orbit around Saturn to get a closer look at one of the more promising moons, Titan. We had planned to drop high-definition cameras and probes onto the surface and have the information beamed directly back to us. But in order to do so, we had to get closer than the enormous Sidonia would allow. Sure, NASA could have made the delicate tools a little more rugged and a little smarter to make the journey from the Sidonia to Titan independently, but they had a better idea. NASA had been toying with the idea of smaller, more agile space cruisers that could launch from the bigger ships. Of course, the upfront cost for one of these manned cruisers would be high, but the hope was that they could be used time and time again to collect samples and launch the so-called dummy gear closer to the target destination, eliminating the need for complicated automation. So, this mission to Titan looming, it was finally time to test one of these cruisers out. It had been docked on the Sidonia, stocked with scientific payload for Titan, and I had been chosen to be its first pilot. I had been the pilot for rocket planes back on Earth, before I became an astronaut, and that certain skill set made me a sure thing for the SC Crete's maiden voyage. I've flown simulation after simulation and even piloted a prototype in low Earth orbit. When we were given the green light, there had been little fear in me, but it was different now. Now I was afraid. There had been 6 of us on the Sidonia, and besides maintaining their position to wait for my return, their sole job had been to monitor my flight and recall me if there were any issues. Their voices had crackled over the radio almost constantly when I first launched, threads of exhilaration and anxiety in their words, but eventually they had gone silent, only checking in every 30 minutes as required. It would be hours before I returned, and the novelty had briefly worn off. Incredible that any of us could ever tire of anything out here in the sprawling blackness of the universe. Nearly my entire field of vision was Saturn now, encircled, yellow-gray and all-consuming, and Titan, a flaxen target growing closer and closer. I had been warned over and over again that the scale of it all would mess with me once I was out here in the smaller cruiser, but I hadn't really understood until I was finally free of the Sidonia, just a tiny metal grain in a sea of giants.
Tara.
The radio had squawked minutes before disaster.
This is Jonathan of the USS Sidonia. Status report. All clear.
I answered robotically.
Confirmed.
There was no reason to worry. Jonathan and the rest of the Sidonia had eyes on me. Right? Didn't they? The micrometeoroid would have been almost impossible to detect. Probably a chipped-off piece of a P-type asteroid orbiting somewhere near here. I don't blame the rest of my crew. I can't. I just hope they don't carry my death on their shoulders forever. It struck like dark lightning, only slightly bigger than a quarter, but it destroyed the glass half-globe of the windshield in front of me effortlessly. The Crete didn't notice right away, still rocketing forward, leaving pieces of glass behind it. The meteoroid exited with nearly the same force it had entered, punching a hole through both my air recycler and the hull, before continuing its internal voyage through the skies. It had taken less than a millisecond, it seemed. I think I forgot to breathe at first, just watching in mute horror as every light and screen on the control panel switched from green to red in an instant. At first, the vacuum from outside of the ship pulled at me from both holes in the ship. But within seconds, the debris from the trashed air recycler clogged the smaller hole, and everything that had been sucked downward was suddenly sucked up again through the hole in the glass. My shock was so complete that I didn't even move as a rogue screw from the wreckage pinged off the glass of my helmet, cracking it like a spiderweb. Still sealed, but for how long? At first, I had been filled with panic, but my training kept my spiraling mind contained as my body went through all the protocols. The silence inside of my helmet was deafening, but with a few frantic presses of the buttons of the control panel, the radio was swapped from the onboard one to the smaller communicator rigged into my helmet. And then I switched from the dwindling air coming from the destroyed recycler to the small tanks on the back of my suit. Okay, now I had a second to think.
Tara,
someone screamed over the communicator.
We're reading catastrophic system failures. What's happening?
I can feel the forward motion of the cruiser slow as the systems all crash at once. I probably have little time to talk before the backup battery in my suit goes too. Steady, I tell myself. Steady.
I'm here. The Crete is disabled. I've lost my air supply. I need to be extracted.
It's still Jonathan on the other end of the call, and he sounds almost as panicked as I do, but he's able to force out the instructions anyway.
You're starting to drift. Gravity is pulling you off course. You either need to steer towards us, or at least remain in one place. It will take us over 2 hours to reach you, and the farther you drift, the longer it will take. Negative. I've lost all controls. The engines are dead.
Jonathan was quiet for a few breaths.
Repeat. The engines are dead, John. The hull is breached.
It's then he loses composure, his usually deep voice breaking.
Tara.
I close my eyes, ignoring the blaring alarms and the lit red buttons slowly fading to black.
I need you to tell me my chances. We'll never reach you,
he whispers. All I can say, when told the date of my death, is oh, I wish it had been different. This living wake, but it wasn't. None of the other crew members came to tell me goodbye. The President of the United States couldn't be patched through to tell me I was a hero, since the light delay was too long, and no hastily planned rescue mission was launched. There was just me, the whooshing noise of space desperately trying to pull me from my restraints, Jonathan's quiet, watery sobs on the other end of the comm, and of course Saturn, taciturn and endless.
Stay with me,
I beg, watching the spider webs on my helmet spread wider, millimeter by millimeter.
I will.
He doesn't ask me about my childhood, or even speak much at all, but knowing he is there keeps me calm. I quiet the alarms coming from inside my helmet, knowing they're distressing him even more. but even they go silent eventually. And I know my reserves are running low too. There is one thing they don't mention on the Discovery Channel specials or in the documentaries made for elementary students about the leaps and bounds that have been made in space travel. They show the weird toilets, the gelatinized dinners, but never the preloaded syringe and needle in the necks of our suits, or the specific order of buttons that have to be pressed on the small keypad on the outside of our suit arm to engage it, even if all the power to the suit is lost. The syringe and injection device have their own battery, so there's always a way out, no matter the situation. Morphine. As soon as the comm battery dies, I'll input the code. Now, all thrust coming from the ship is gone, and it's being carried by the gravity of Saturn, leaving shards of glass and metal in its wake. I'm being pulled constantly towards the enormous hole in the windshield, but my harness keeps me in my seat. Maybe after the morphine I'll undo the restraints and become just another object trapped in this eternal orbit. I'm sure the oxygen is getting thin when I slip into the dream of Marie and me on the swing set. And when I'm pulled from the fantasy, however many hours later, even the static of the comm is silent. The batteries are all dead and I'm truly alone. "You're not alone," Maria says, crouching next to me, somehow 7 years old again as she takes my gloved hands in her small ones. "I'm hallucinating. Not alone. Not anymore," Marie assured me, her sapphire eyes shiny with tears. I laugh bitterly, pulling one hand from the grip of my sister and pressing the buttons on my suit to initiate the kill switch injection. I start to hyperventilate on the last number. I don't want to die, I'm not ready. But eternity is coming for me, no matter what I want. The glass of my helmet audibly cracks, and like an eggshell tapped in the corner of a bowl, it finally shatters. I should choke as the air is sucked from my lungs, but I'm too sluggish, too euphoric to even try for one last breath. Space is silent except for Marie. "Your needle's empty. You already pressed the buttons, Tara. Now let's go." My skin is flash freezing, but I lift my hand to my throat and she's right. It aches on the side, and when I turn my head, seeking oxygen in some sort of death spasm, I feel the needle tear through my skin. Marie helps me undo the buckles of my harness. My hands are still working despite the moisture in my eyes having frozen them forever open. But it's fine. I wouldn't want to blink and miss this moment anyway. When the belts finally fall away, Marie wraps her arms around my neck, and I embrace her as we are pulled into the vacuum, holding her small body close. Saturn is silent and unforgiving, but still it takes us into its orbit, welcoming, and there we will remain, dead, empty, and iced over, until we plummet through the atmosphere thousands of years later, like two tiny renditions of Cassini, burning away long after our mission was complete. It had taken so long to get home that by the time Jonathan Nichols, captain of the USS Sidonia, stepped foot on the Earth once more, the world had already grieved and nearly forgotten. Not him, though. The last breaths of Tara would haunt him for the rest of his days. NASA, of course, had kept a copy of her obituary, and in search of some sort of closure, Jonathan read it over and over again, before simply looking at the picture of her face, feeling hollow. The obituary read, "Tara Anderson, age 29, died a hero aboard her vessel, the SC Crete, in a catastrophic accident. She is preceded in death by her father, Don Anderson, who passed at 61 of natural causes, and her twin sister, Mary Anderson, who passed at age 7 after an accident at the family's lakeside vacation home.